Okay, let's round off with a few more comments submitted via WhatsApp. Thank you, Erin W. from Hickling. Erin writes, thanks for reading out my message about Jan Kvetch. That was only last week, yes. He didn't have a fun German GP, says Erin, but the team did better than most will at Ipswich, so that is encouraging. Yeah, Kings Lynn, well, first things first, so Jan didn't have a storming opening Grand Prix at Landshut, and yeah, he came off at one point, but hopefully no lasting damage, and he'll be back on the bike and back scoring points, certainly for the Stars. Yes, I can't remember what the actual scoreline was at Ipswich, but was it 52-38 or something along those lines, so certainly not the worst performance for an opposition team at Vauxhall this season. If I remember correctly, Chris Harris didn't have a particularly good evening at Vauxhall, and I'm sure he'll put that right. So yeah, again, as I keep saying, a very interesting side, the Stars. They intrigue me, and I'm sure they'll do rather well moving forward. Erin, thanks for taking time to message. As has Nikki H from Hazelmere. Nikki H from Hazelmere. I'm not quite sure where Hazelmere is. I no longer get to watch live Speedway very often, so I tend to watch the odd BSN stream. British Speedway Network, of course. Wanted to give glowing reports on the recent meetings from Workington and Glasgow, both very good in capital letters. So Nikki, sorry to hear you don't get trackside as often as you might like, and glad to hear that you're taking advantage of the excellent service from the British Speedway Network team. Big shout out to all the crew, all the BSN crew. And yes, they were at Workington. I think they beat Scunthorpe in a fairly close meeting on Saturday, and Glasgow Berwick was pretty tasty on Sunday night as well. So glad that you are enjoying the live stream of Speedway, Nikki. Dan from Greater Teesside. I'm back on about the Bears, says Dan. Even without Eric, we looked likely to see off Berwick in the Knockout Cup. The Bears are going through! And that's a nod, of course, a reference to last Saturday night. Redcar lost by just 4 points in the Knockout Cup first leg at Shielfield, and they defend that against the Bandits. I think it's this Friday night. So Dan and his fellow Bears fans obviously uber confident that 4 points will swiftly be overturned, and that the Bears will progress through to the next round. I'm sure Stuart Dixon and the Bandits might have something to say about that, Dan, but we'll keep across and watch with interest the result. Thanks again for getting back in touch. And finally for this week, Manchester Mick from Manchester. Where else would Manchester Mick be from? We managed to salvage something from Monday morning, but only just. We can't keep relying on our top two in every meeting. I reckon we will improve, but we'll need to find it ASAP. So that's reference, as I touched on earlier on, to the home and away Bank Holiday Monday War of the Roses clash with Sheffield. So it looked at one point, I think Sheffield were they 10 points up on the Aces or thereabouts at the National Speedway Stadium at one point, and in the end the Aces, Dan Bewley, Brady Kurtz were at the heart of the fight back, and they got the Aces over the line to snatch the points, snatch the win in the morning. But were soundly beaten, it's got to be said, by a rampant Sheffield side at Owlerton later in the day. But Manchester Mick, I admire your positivity, and listen, I'm sure there's plenty to be positive about. Sheffield aren't a bad side, and neither are the Aces. I think there's more to come from both of them. Thank you very much for taking time to write in. You could have your own message, text form or voice note form, read out or played out aloud. Please take a couple of minutes, use the WhatsApp number or any of our social media accounts and comment, and we'll pick up your comment and add it to next week's episode. Thank you. Okay, moving on now to our final topic already for this week, Fans Pulse Lap 4. The subject you voted to be discussed and debated is, in modern day Speedway, which rider or riders do you consider to be the most stylish, the most exciting to watch? So throughout our time watching and enjoying the sport, there's always been some riders who just maybe for some reason just stands out a little bit more. It might be their movement on a bike or things that they tend to do on a bike that other riders really emulate. And I just wonder, Stuart Robson, I'll come to you first. You know, from a spectating point of view, whether it was a teammate or whether it's just you were watching a meeting, what rider or riders in your time watching Speedway have you perhaps most enjoyed watching? And can you put your finger on why that would be the case?
From my youth, my favourite rider used to always be Martin Dixon. So sort of mid to late 80s, or mid 80s or whatever. I used to love watching Dicko. He was brilliant, and he never gave up, and he was always he was really good for getting the last bend around the outside kind of thing, and race to the line. And he was always one of my favourite riders to watch from back in the day. There was a couple of other riders, and Mark Courtney, like he was mentioned earlier. He was great. I loved watching Mark. It's such a good style. He was so smooth on the bike. He could be on the roughest track ever, and he would skim across them bumps like there was none there. It was, and everyone else would literally be all over the place, bouncing through the holes and everything. And Mark was so smooth. He was great to watch.
I shook Mark's hand at Glasgow on Sunday, and I haven't watched it yet. Yeah, Mark was a bit of a hero of mine, and you're right. He made riding a Speedway bike look so easy. His style was just unbelievably classy style that he had. Big Mac, what about yourself? Any riders who immediately, past or present, who immediately spring to mind?
I mean, just what Robbo said there about Mark Courtney, I had the fortunate experience at Sheffield that Mark came out with me when I was struggling a little bit. I was 17 and spent, I don't know, maybe half an hour on the track after the match with me, getting me quicker, showing me some lines. And he was like your George Best or your Paul Gascoigne of Speedway football, whatever you want to call it. He was another level. But one guy that I remember that, from a young age, I used to just love, because I just could not understand how he still stayed in the bike, was Kellymoran. Kelly Moran back in the day was just unbelievable to watch. He would be nearly upside down on the bike, and from a team style point of view, or a style racing point of view, the Yanks have always seemed to have had some special. I mean, Bobby Ott was another one. Bobby Ott was he looked like he was in somebody else's bike racing around the bends. But they were two riders that always stood out. In my eyes, you wouldn't take your eyes off them. I mean, you look at some of the sort of bigger riders, and even now I like to watch Sam Masters. You look at the way that Sam Masters races, that inside line, the way that Sam can turn that bike, get into the bends. He's so fast for such a tall lad. But style-wise, but back in the day when we had the smaller tracks, the grippier tracks, you look at Berrington Luff and some of the style. I mean, Mark Courtney around Berrington Luff was just another level. And, I'm going to touch on Stuart's brother, Scott. I used to love watching Scott around Berwick, because Scott he'd just get down in the bike, and it was like Stuart, it was that style all the way around in Berrington Luff, and he was another one down there. And I think different tracks had certain styles, and that was my memories.
Isn't it great that that Speedway riders have that ability to have an individual style? Because you would think a bike is a bike by and large, a track is a track by and large. But the only differentiator is the pilot, right? And some of the natural. You mentioned a couple of the American riders, Stuart, as being quite flamboyant, and I don't know if that's because of them having to turn the bike so damned hard around the smaller, tight American tracks or not. But Smarslick, we talked about Smarslick last week. He hangs off that bike, and by golly, can he work the bike? Can he work the bike and work the lines to make some of these passes that he does? It's incredible.
I think now when you look at the speed of these guys in the Grand Prix, to have certain styles like the Smarslick style, it's very rare. You look at Jack Holder as well. I mean, a lot of the guys have obviously got their own styles, but the speed that these guys are getting up to in the Grand Prix tracks, and you look at Bartosz, I mean, he's got a catapult going into the bends. He goes into that berm right in the fence, and it just shoots him straight in, and he's just, it's great to watch. Absolutely great to watch. Great entertainment.
Carol, you've worked with a lot of riders, a lot of high profile riders, a lot of exciting riders. I dare say, they might be listening or watching, or they might not, Carol. But any riders that you've worked with that you'd like to single out as being particularly exciting to watch out on track?
Yeah, obviously the main one for us and obviously you guys see him quite a lot, is obviously Chris Harris. Chris, he's not always in control, but he's certainly entertainment, and he's going to give 110% all the time. There's not one race I've seen him go out and give 50% or 80%. It's always 100%, 110%, and that's his attitude, and it's brilliant. Yes, sometimes it doesn't look good, but it makes it exciting for the supporters. And what he can do on a bike is phenomenal. But yeah, he's obviously, one that's current, that sort of sticks in the mind. But I think, going back a few years, and I think a rider that he was so smooth on a bike and so fast was Lee Adams. Lee Adams he had this unique style. He was one of these that never really moved much on a bike.
Yeah.
But he was, it's like Robbo said there, with some of the boys that, like the Courtneys and stuff, and they made rough tracks look smooth. And he was that sort of rider. Doesn't matter where you went, you could put him on Long Eaton with bricks coming through the base, and it looked like he was, riding around on, ice somewhere. He was that smooth, and I just thought he was unbelievable. He could gate, he was so fast, and he didn't really have many knocks, did he? And when you're like that, you don't get that. Mm-hmm. So you go somebody like that, and then you go completely the opposite way. And one of our 360 guests, obviously Ulrich Ostigard. Ulrich Ostigard is one of the most uncomfortable riders on a motorcycle. I don't know anybody apart from Ulrich that rides with one eye closed. And there's photos of him on the third and fourth bend at Peterborough with his eye closed, going around the corner, hanging off the bike with his legs stuck out the side, and it's like, I'm like, Ulrich, how the hell do you ride a speedway bike? It's so unnatural, but I don't know how he does it. It's like, he's totally the opposite. So
he wasn't winking at you, Carol, was he, as he went past?
I don't know. Maybe he wanted heat 15. That's what he was after. But you've got three riders there that are completely different. Okay, they was all riding similar, at similar times, but their styles are so different. But they're all good riders. They've all been at a top level, in at their time. So, it's they're the three that sort of stand out. Obviously, Ulrich I've worked with for many years, so I know exactly what he's like.
It's a fascinating subject, because you could almost do this by decades, right? Pick out some riders for a particular decade, and Stuart, you were going back about Kelly Moran, etc., and some riders. Steve Schofield used to be. I used to think Steve Schofield. He was a small, diminutive little stature of a man, but his style on a bike was incredible. That Darcy Ward. A huge loss to the world of speedway when Darcy was injured, but on a bike he was absolutely phenomenal. He was a beast of a rider but the things he could do on a bike to build up speed and pass, go where no other rider would go, was absolutely incredible.
I think when you look at some of his Grand Prix that Darcy was in, the New Zealand Grand Prix comes to mind to me. Yes. I think that was like a long track, and the racing with Cy Butonoff,
I remember it,
with Greg Hancock, and it's like, wow. Again, he was so talented. Darcy could jump in anything and race it. That was the way he was, and his talent on a speedway bike was phenomenal, and just tragic. Lost his speedway as well, obviously. The accident he had, but we talk about other riders there, and another one that came to mind was Jano Pedersen. The Dane. He was leg trailer. You watched the way he got on a bike, and again, he was quite similar to Lee Adams. Lee Adams was, like Carl says, just never moved. His style was the same. Didn't matter what it was like, the track. But again, Jano Pedersen was another one that I liked his style as well. When you want to get into like some of the foreign guys, obviously the Yanks they've always seemed to breed riders that have got great styles, but when you look at Costa Mesa, where they race, you know, some of the riders that are still racing there. I mean, the guys, I watched a meeting, I think it was 2 weeks ago from Costa Mesa, and the guys that are racing there in their 50s, I mean, there was two of them in their 60s, and they're still racing, they're still hanging off the bike, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, I mean, Sean McConnell just retired last year. I don't know if you've seen his farewell meeting, guys, but you know, I think he was 112. And you've got Bobby Schwartz. I mean, Bobby Schwartz must be about 85 now. He's having a farewell meeting. I mean, Ronniecorrey was talking about racing again at Bellevue, and you think, I mean, I know Ronnie's a little bit younger, but again, you know, Ronnie's he's up for it, and the US guys just seem to be able to race straight into their Zimmer frames. They do.
Well, you know, Greg Hancock was the epitome of that. I had this theory that Greg was going to ride until he was 60 years old in the Grand Prix, but he gave up a little bit before then. We better give Ronnie a call out, because Ronnie wasn't a bad stylist in his day either, was he?
Oh, he was at Team Road with Ronnie. I remember one race, we were at Eastbourne, and it was one that I mentioned we actually won, and you know, I was a bit inexperienced. Ronnie was the world class rider that he was, and he just smothered me around the track, and thankfully we got a 5-1. But no, again, his style again was a great style. You know, you know, obviously I was a little bit taller. Stuart was the same, and a little bit lumpier, as they called it, I think, for the bigger guys to try and get a good style. But you know, no, Ronniecorrey was just another magician on a bike.
Robbo, any former teammates of yours that stand out just because of their exceptionally exciting style or ability on a bike?
Former teammates, well, you've already mentioned Bomber. He's one that stands out. Still to this day is just as exciting to watch as ever. He was a teammate at Rye House and at Coventry for a while, and yeah. Well, Nichols in his day can still produce some top racing. Another former teammate, there's different riders for different reasons, isn't there? You know, Nero was always great to watch.
A couple of riders, Carol, who I enjoy watching, you know, current riders. Josh Pickering, there's got something about Josh. He's got an extra edge to him, I think. He can be a hard rider, but he's very talented on a speedway bike. And one of my all-time favourites, I've got to say, is Ben Barker. I just think Ben Barker is absolutely, you know, I think he's box office on a bike is Ben. You must have worked with Ben at some point, Carol.
Yeah. I had a couple of seasons with Ben. Larger than life character, but yeah, he's certainly a rider that you won't want behind you. He's one of them that I think a lot of riders used to say, "Go on then, Ben, you can go first, and I'll follow you," right? Because you don't want him coming from behind you, because you don't know where he was coming from. But yeah, again, he's all action, and I think that's. You know, the only way he could ride a bike, he probably wasn't the smoothest of riders, but he worked the bike really hard. And again, similar to Bomber, obviously not the quality of Bomber, but certainly the heart of Bomber. You know, he'd give you everything, and such a brilliant team man. I've always said, if you want a team man, if you want two team men that are really good, is Bomber and Ben. They are 100% team men. You know, even if they're guesting for you, if they're guesting for you, they will give you 110% even as a guest. And I love that. You know, I've had guests that just turn up and take the paycheck, and that's it. They're like, 5 points will do me tonight. You know, they wouldn't be looking at that. They'd go, 10 points is not enough for me. And that was their attitude, and spot on. I like Ben. Obviously, I like Bomber. Fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Ben should have gone a lot further than he did, or has done. But that's Speedway and this generation.
It is. It must be something in the water down Cornwall with two Cornishmen doing the flying the flag for their county. Listen, that will do us for episode 4. Guys, thanks very much for all your input and thought leadership on getting us through all of those subjects tonight. Some really fascinating subjects. It would be fascinating to hear from you 360 speedsters if you agree, disagree, strongly agree or disagree with any of the opinions and views that we have. These are our own views and not at all the views of any club or other speedway associations that we may have. But it would be really interesting to get some feedback from you guys and some contributions as to your own views. Please stick across, as I say, our 360 Speedway output. Please share and like and comment to your heart's content. It's really refreshing to hear from you. And at that, we will wrap things up and enjoy your week ahead. Enjoy your Speedway, and we'll see you on episode 5 next week. Until then, thanks from these guys and good night.